Today our scripture comes from the book of Romans. Romans chapter 12, verse 2. And we're kind of continuing with the idea of, from last week, we were invited to the table and we are welcomed at the table. But that moment of transformation, that is what we are going to continue to focus on. If I can find... There we go. All right. Found it. Romans chapter 12, verse 2. And it says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." You know, when we gather at the table, when we make that confession of faith, when we accept Jesus in our life, we are transformed. And our scripture here tells us that transformation isn't just an idea, but it is a renewed mind, and that is essential to understanding God's will for a transformative life. We're to be transformed with our whole body, just like we are to love God with our whole selves. We are to love God with all our mind, all our body, and all our spirit. And we are to be transformed in that same way. Transformed in our mind and our body and spirit. It's part of following that greatest commandment that Jesus set for us. I wonder, when is a time in your life that you experienced transformation? Did it happen intentionally? Did it happen and you didn't even notice it? Maybe it just surprised you. But not only do we experience transformation in our lives through different experiences, through moving, through new life phases, through college, through new jobs, new families. Transformation continually happens in our life. It's a cycle. But not only do we continually experience transformation in our lives, we also continually experience transformation in our faith. Maybe that transformation is now. Maybe you are experiencing, and maybe you just experienced it and you're still on that high, that renewed faith. Maybe you just remembered how good God is in your life and you just feel renewed. Maybe you are in that uncertain time of transformation of faith. Maybe it's right before and you are in a low spot. Maybe feeling stagnant or disappointed. Just like everything, there's a time and a season for our transformations as individuals. I realized that back when right before I moved to Seattle, I had started that low point before transformation could happen. Feeling a lot of doubt, a lot of fear, many unknowns. I was going through life transformations, getting ready to graduate college, trying to figure out what was next. You know, you're supposed to have it all figured out by then, right? By the time you're 22, you need to know what the rest of your life is going to look like. My life was turned upside down my last year in college. I had the death of my grandfather. I had the death of a long-term relationship. I had friendships that were just under a lot of pressure. It was a dark time. It was a rough time. I was overworked. I was taking 18 hours in college in my upper level classes trying to graduate. I had a part-time internship that was unpaid at AIDS Outreach Center. I had a part-time job at a church that was paid, but it's church work, so it wasn't really part-time. was overwhelmed. I was burning out faster than I could imagine. And that's when I basically decided, you know what, I'm gonna leave the state for a while, figure some things out. And I almost went from that caterpillar into a cocoon when I moved to Seattle. Unsure of what my future held, unsure of where my gifts were, unsure of my relationship with God. I prayed continuously, but I just struggled to know God's presence. I struggled and struggled and struggled and prayed, and at some point I was like, okay, fine, I'm done. If you want to talk to me, you can talk to me, but I'm just gonna be here. I wouldn't say I gave up my faith, I just stopped engaging my faith. And I moved to Seattle and lived in my cocoon, experienced all kinds of things, made a new family up there, kind of entered an unexpected career up there. I learned more about myself than I could ever know. As many of you know, I share a lot about my time in Seattle. It was important to me because it was that time of transformation. But then God started, working in the way that God does. Sitting down with this new family after work and sharing meals and conversations. And they were like, Sarah, you went to church. Tell me about church. Well, whatever. No, I got questions about God and I think you can answer. Well, but right now we're eating. But Sarah, okay, let's talk about it. Those little moments, finding that new family. I found a new place to live when I was down there that was like a family. I had new roommates, and Howard had his little buddy Bruiser, and Howard's my dog, sorry. And Bruiser was my roommate's pug. But they, just got along really well, and life was good. And I was starting to feel renewed. I wasn't quite there yet. My transformation wasn't over. I was still in the cocoon. Then that time period ended up coming to an end, and I moved back to Texas very unwillingly, but that's just the way life works sometimes. And you never know what God is doing in the background, those things that are kind of just, I call it like that God magic, where things are just kind of aligning. Those mysterious things that you never knew about. I moved back, and my grandmother got really ill, and I was thankful that I could be there.